The air was sharp and cold. The sun was shining down on us, despite the rather gloomy day. As the beautiful rays of golden light fell down across my skin, I took one last glance at the large crowd gathered amongst us. So much joy, excitement, and nervousness was flowing within my veins, but when I looked in the beautiful marble eyes staring down across from me, all my worries vanished and all that was left was pure content. Until I took a deep breath and looked at him again. I really was marrying my cousin.
So, how did we get here? This whole Antenna 3 worthy life story all starts unlike most others, at 4:50 a.m. on May 24th, 1819, in the Kingston Palace in London. A little baby girl Alexandra Victoria was born. Nobody knew what legacy little Victoria would build along the years back when she was born, although we all now know her as the Queen Victoria, the Queen of the Great Britain and Ireland from 1837 till her death in 1901, ruling for almost 64 years, a period that even earned her her name as the Victorian era. It was a period known for its great industrial, political, scientific, and military change within the United Kingdom, and it was marketed by a great expansion of the British Empire. She was also granted by the British Parliament the additional title of Empress of India. Victoria was the daughter of Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathearn, the fourth son of King George III, and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Suffield. After the deaths of her father and grandfather in 1820, she was raised under the close supervision by her mother and her controller, John Conroy. She inherited the throne at age 18 after her father's three elder brothers died without surviving. Legitimate issue. Victoria, a constitutional monarch, attended privately to influence governmental policy and ministerial appointments. Publicly, she became a national icon who was identified by strict standards of personal morality. She also loved to write in her diary, which we all are damn thankful for because this makes our job so much easier. According to one of her biographers, Victoria wrote an average of 2,500 words a day during her adult life. From July 1832 until just before her death, she kept a detailed journal which eventually encompassed 122 volumes. Victoria has described her childhood as rather melancholic. Her mother was extremely protective, and Victoria was raised largely isolated from other children under the so-called Kensington system, an elaborate set of rules and protocols devised by the Duchess and her ambitious and domineering comptroller, Sir John Conroy, who was rumored to be the Duchess's lover. The system prevented the princess from meeting people whom her mother and Conroy deemed undesirable, including most of her father's family, and was designed to render her weak and dependent upon them. The Duchess avoided the court because she was scandalized by the presence of King William's illegitimate children. Victoria shared a bedroom with her mother every night, studied with private tutors to a regular timetable, and spent her play hours with her dolls and her King Charles Spaniel, Dash. Her lessons included French, German, Italian, and Latin, but she spoke only English at home, truly an Englishwoman. At Ramsgate, in October 1835, Victoria contracted a severe fever, which Conroy initially dismissed as a childish pretense. While Victoria was ill, Conroy and the Duchess unsuccessfully badgered her to make Conroy her private secretary. As a teenager, Victoria resisted persistent attempts by her mother and Conroy to appoint him to her staff. Once queen, she banned him from her presence, but he remained in her mother's household. By 1836, Victoria's maternal uncle, Leopold, who had been king of the Belgians since 1831, hoped to marry her to Prince Albert, the son of his brother, Ernest I, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Leopold arranged for Victoria's mother to invite her Coburg relatives to visit her in May 1836, with the purpose of introducing Victoria to Albert. William IV, however, disapproved of any match with the Coburgs and instead favored the suit of Prince Alexander of the Netherlands, second son of Prince of Orange. Victoria was aware of the various matrimonial plans and critically appraised a parade of eligible princes. According to her diary, she enjoyed Albert's company from the beginning. After the visit, she wrote,
Albert is extremely handsome. His hair is about the same color as mine. His eyes are large and blue, and he has a beautiful nose and a very sweet mouth with fine teeth. But the charm of his countenance is his expression, which is most delightful.
Alexander, on the other hand, she described as
very plain.
She later wrote to King Leopold, whom she considered her best and kindest advisor, to thank him.
For the prospect of great happiness you have contributed to give me in the person of dear Albert. He possesses every quality that could be desired to render me perfectly happy. He is so sensible, so kind, and so good, and so amiable too. He has besides the most pleasing and delightful exterior and appearance you can possibly see.
However, at 17, Victoria, though interested in Albert, was not yet ready to marry. The parties did not undertake a formal engagement, but assumed that the match would take place in due time. While her love for Albert, her cousin, blossomed, she was greeted with the news of her father's passing as she wrote in her diary.
I was awoke at 6 o'clock by Mama, who told me the Archbishop of Canterbury and Lord Cunningham were here and wished to see me. I got out of bed and went into my sitting room, only in my dressing gown and alone, and saw them. Lord Cunningham then acquainted me that my poor uncle, the king, was no more, and had expired at 12 minutes past 2 this morning, and consequently that I am the queen.
Official documents prepared on the first day of her reign described her as Alexandra Victoria, but the first name was withdrawn at her own wish and not used again. Though Victoria was now queen, as an unmarried young woman, she was required by social convention to live with her mother, despite their differences over the Kensington system, and her mother's continued reliance on Conroy. Her mother was consigned to a remote apartment in Buckingham Palace, and Victoria often refused to see her. When Victoria complained to Melbourne that her mother's proximity promised torment for years, Melbourne sympathized with her, but said it could be avoided by marriage, which Victoria called a shocking alternative. Victoria showed interest in Albert's education for the future role he would have to play as her husband, but she resisted attempts to rush her into wedlock. Victoria continued to praise Albert following his second visit in October 1839. Albert and Victoria felt mutual affection, and the Queen promised to him on 15th of October 1839, just 5 days after he had arrived in Windsor. They were married on the 10th of February 1840 in the Chapel Royal of St. James's Palace, London. Victoria was love-struck. She spent the evening after their wedding lying down with a headache, but wrote ecstatically in her diary.
I never spent such an evening. My dearest, dear Albert, his excessive love and affection gave me feelings of heavenly love and happiness I never could have hoped to have felt before. He clasped me in his arms, and we kissed each other again and again. His beauty, his sweetness and gentleness. Really, how can I ever be thankful enough to have such a husband, to be called by names of tenderness I have never yet heard used to me before, was a bliss beyond relief. Oh, this was the happiest day of my life.
Albert became an important political advisor as well as the Queen's companion, replacing Melbourne as the dominant influential figure in the first half of her life. Victoria's mother was evicted from the palace to Winchester House in Belgrave Square. After the death of Victoria's aunt, Princess Augusta, in 1840, Victoria's mother was given both Clarence and Frogmore houses. Through Albert's mediation, relations between mother and daughter slowly improved. But enough with the boring life details. I know you're here for the spice, and oh boy do I get a story for you. Ladies and gents, today I present contemporary lithograph of Edward Oxford's attempt to assassinate Victoria, 1840. During Victoria's first pregnancy in 1840, in the first few months of the marriage, 18-year-old Edward Oxford attempted to assassinate her while she was riding in a carriage with Prince Albert on her way to visit her mother. Oxford fired twice, but either both bullets missed or, as he later claimed, the guns had no shot. He was tried for high treason, found not guilty by reason of insanity, committed to an insane asylum, definitely, and later sent to live in Australia. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, Victoria's popularity soared, mitigating residual discontent over the Hastings affair and the bedchamber crisis. Her daughter, also named Victoria, was born on 21 November 1840. The Queen hated being pregnant, viewed breastfeeding with disgust, and though newborn babies were ugly. Nevertheless, over the following 17 years, she and Albert had a further 8 children. Now call that hypocrisy. Our shocking news ain't over either, folks. As way later, in 1861, when Victoria's mother passed away, her papers revealed the shocking revelation that her mother loved her deeply, that she was heartbroken and accused Conroy and Laxton for separating the two. And by the beginning of December, Albert was diagnosed with typhoid fever and died on the 14th the same year. Her reign continued for many years, plagued by varying dramas and events we won't go into detail about, or this will take us a decade to put together. The Great Britain ruled across the world with her own throne until her end on January 22, 1901, with a reign of 63 years, 7 months and 2 days. Victoria was the longest reigning British monarch and the longest reigning queen reigned in world history, until her great-great-granddaughter Elizabeth II surpassed her on 9 September 2015. She was the last monarch of Britain from the House of Hanover. Her son Edward VII belonged to her husband's House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Victoria was physically unprepossessing. She was stout, dowdy, and only about 5 feet tall, but she succeeded in projecting a grand image. She experienced unpopularity during the first years of her knighthood, but was well likely during the 1880s and the 1890s, when she embodied the empire as a benevolent matriarchal figure. Only after the release of her diary and letters did the extent of her political influence become known to the wide public. And now, a word from our sponsors.
Gosh, I'm so tired of my ex-husband. People are so tiring these days.
I know, right?
I cannot even do anything anymore, but it's fine, because I found it. The secret to the rich and independent woman.
Did you tell me about it?
Oh, I will.
Hey ladies.
Never mind then.
God, I gotta get his number.
What about the rich and independent woman part?
People change, Rihanna!
You know? Yeah. As I walk you through Wonderland. In Wonderland. Come on. We're all a fly.
A brand new perfume made for the man. Sweet scents mixed with the masculine woody tones. It attracts girls like a magnet.
In Wonderland.
The Golden Secret, the perfume made out of Reese.
Let's ride, y'all.
Do it again.
Sorry guys, we have to pay the rent somehow.
Don't mind them.
We're not quite done yet, blokes, because we can't talk about Victoria without talking about her iconic grandson, the one and only George Frederick Ernest Albert, aka George V. Born on the 3rd of June 1865, he was King of UK, the British Dominions, and also Emperor of India. He was born during the reign of his grandmother Queen Victoria, him being the second son of Albert Edward, Prince of Wales, and Alexandra, Princess of Wales, and was third in the line of succession to the British throne, behind his father and his elder brother, Prince Albert Victor. Eventually, his brother unexpectedly died in early 1892, putting him directly in line for the throne. George married his brother's fiancée, Princess Victoria Mary of Teck, the following year, and they had 6 children. These people just love to marry the weirdest of bunch, huh? Following the death of Queen Victoria in 1901, George's father ascended the throne as Edward VII, and George was named the Prince of Wales until his father's death in 1910, when he became king. He then became the first monarch of the House of Windsor in 1917. George suffered from smoking-related health problems throughout much of his later reign. In the end, like always, smoke in your lungs wins, and George passed away in January 1936. About his life, George saw the world through the British colonies around the 1879s, while trying to learn a new language but ultimately failing. He served in the Navy most of the time under his uncle's, Prince Alfred's, command, stationed in Malta. There he found and fell in love with, ding ding ding, you guessed it, his cousin, Princess Mary of Edinburgh, which refused his proposal. Later, in November 1891, Albert Victor, George's older brother, got engaged to his second cousin, Princess Victoria Mary of Teck. But after merely 6 weeks, Albert passed away due to pneumonia. Like any true gentleman, when he saw a woman grieving the loss of her fiancé, George proposed to Mary a year later and she accepted. They married on July 6, 1893. Like any true Englishman, George V had 5 sons and a daughter, which claimed that he was a strict father, to the point they were terrified of him. He preferred a simple, quiet life, unlike many others in the royal family, and he played a large role in the building of the Royal Philatelic Collection.